Day 3 of the 2025 NFL Draft is officially underway, and the Las Vegas Raiders made their pick, and they're taking a wide receiver that has explosive ability. Dante Thornton Jr. is a 6'5 wide receiver who ran a 4.3 40-yard dash, has a 33-inch vertical. This is a guy that has so much upside, and it's a guy that hasn't really shown that he's like that true number one caliber wide receiver, but this guy has a ton of upside. And Tennessee's an interesting school, right? They're a very explosive offense. Tennessee had a young quarterback last year, and I do think that kind of hindered a guy like Thornton. But when I remember, when I was watching the Shrine Bowl tape specifically, I remember watching Thornton, and I remember seeing that, hey, this guy's not only bigger than most of these corners that he's going up against, but he's a pretty good separator, right? Like, he's not an incredible route runner by any means, but like when he gets going, and you can see that 4.3 speed on his tape. The Las Vegas Raiders are drafting a wide receiver who's probably going to play X for the Raiders as well, which is interesting because they drafted Jack Bash yesterday, a wide receiver out of TCU. And he's also kind of that same wide receiver, right? It seems like the Raiders have realized that they need wide receivers. And we weren't the only ones that realized that, right? We spoke about this the entire offseason, that the Raiders got to add playmakers, they got to get more explosive, and they've done just that over the first 3 days of the draft, up to the point that we're kind of at. I'm sure the Raiders are going to continue to add some weapons on offense. I'm sure they'll shore up the defensive line, right? Add a little bit of depth. But to me, Dante Thornton has a ton of potential, a ton of upside. So you can see his official measurements. The guy is listed as 6'5", right? I think he was measured at just a little bit under 6'5" exactly, right? He was like 6'4" and like 6'8" or 7'8" or something like that. But to me, being measured that tall, 205 pounds. The potential with Thornton is that he's 6'5". He's only 205 pounds, but he could probably add like 20 pounds of muscle as he kind of, gets into the NFL, starts to develop a little bit, gets into that NFL, workout and program. But this guy, for as big as he is athletic as hell, right? You don't get 6'5" wide receivers that rank, as the 6th best athletic wide receiver, right? Now, all of this stuff checks out, and even his RAS score is really, really, really good. He ranked a 9.85 out of 10, which puts him at 59 out of 3,800 wide receivers from 1987 to 2025. Of course, all of this stuff is off the field stuff, but, there was a time when the Raiders would have drafted Dante Thornton, with the 6th overall pick. There was a time when the Raiders would have made that pick, right? Obviously, those times are not here anymore, but being able to get this guy in the 4th round to me is a good pick. A lot of upside, super, super explosive wide receiver. Do understand though, this guy didn't have a lot of like targets, right? So with that, he didn't have a ton of yards. He didn't have like 1,200 yards, right? Which, some people will hold that against him a little bit, but do understand, if Thornton had, 120 targets, he would have had like 1,500 yards, right? He officially finished the season with 26 catches, 661 yards. That's incredible right there, man. That many yards on that many catches, 25.4 yards per catch, 6 touchdowns this past season. Thornton's a very, very interesting player, man. That's what I'm going to tell you guys. I think there's so much upside with Thornton. Obviously, he'll have to develop, and we'll see how he kind of fits in and how he's able to kind of, get into the NFL as a wide receiver and kind of develop. Wide receiver is always that one position where, you could be, if you're not if you're not taken in the top 10 picks, you can then be, just as good if you're a 4th round pick as you are a 3rd round pick if you go undrafted. Like, wide receiver is that one position where it doesn't really matter where you get drafted. The guys that are like Jamar Chase, that are like Malik Neighbors, Justin Jefferson, those guys generally get drafted, within the first 3 or 4, within the first probably like 10 picks, right? Generally speaking, Justin Jefferson's different. We had like 8 really good wide receivers that came out that year. But generally speaking, when you're a different type of wide receiver, you go in the top 10 to 15 picks. After that, it's kind of difficult because some 2nd round picks are cut after 2 years, right? These never kind of work out. The Raiders took Bryan Edwards, I believe, in the 3rd round years ago, right? 2018, 2019, maybe it was 2020. Never really worked out for the Raiders, right? But he had a ton of upside as well. And we drafted Jack Bash with the 58th overall pick yesterday. We'll see how he works out, right? There's a chance he doesn't, right? But there's also a chance he's the best wide receiver in the class. There's a chance Dante Thornton ends up becoming the best wide receiver in the class. Obviously, there's also the other, side of it. They could bust out. We'll see what ends up happening. But I do like the upside, and I do like the potential. just taking a step back, you look at the Raiders' offense right now. There's a lot of talented players now on this offense. You got a lot of different roles as well, right? We have to remember that when NFL offenses are built, they're not built with like, hey, just put the 4 best playmakers out there, right? That's not how they're going to construct it, right? Like, you need a guy like Dante Thornton who's 6'5" to be able to go across the middle of the field. He has to have the ability to run vertically, which he obviously does, right? 4.3 40-yard dash. But then you need guys, similar to Thornton, you need guys opposite of that, right? You need guys like Jack Besh, who, maybe isn't as fast over the top, but he's a much better route runner and separator. So he runs a post route, he's going to get open based off of, like the top of the stem, right? How he kind of breaks out of that route. So Jack Bash, Thornton are 2 completely different type of wide receivers. Jakobi Meyers is not elite at anything, right? But he's just really good at everything. There's nothing Jakobi Meyers is not really good at, right? I would say he has elite hands, right? But hands don't matter all that much. But Jakobi Meyers is a really good route runner. He's a really good, within the first 2 or 3 steps as he kind of gets out of his break, or not his break, but as soon as he kind of gets out of his stance, right? Really good first 2-3 steps. He can make contested catches, jump back technique, right? When the ball's in the air, and he has to kind of stop and find that football. Really good. So you got 3 different type of wide receivers right there. I would say Trey Tucker is very similar to Dante Thornton. The difference is I think Trey Tucker might be maybe a little bit faster, right? In terms of, I think Thornton's fast. I do think he's fast, but Thornton's fast after the first 5 steps, right? Steps 6 through 15 is when Thornton really, really burns people, right? Trey Tucker's fast after that first step. He's fast, right? But they are very similar wide receivers. Thornton's just a lot taller. But Trey Tucker probably moves a little bit better, which will be interesting to see if Trey Tucker's role kind of gets pushed out of this offense. When you bring in guys that have that type of speed, you don't need 5 of those guys out there because those guys are playing a role, right? The role that a guy like Thornton, a guy like Trey Tucker plays is called the influence role, right? If you guys don't know what that is let's say you have a offensive design, right? Let's say you have 2 wide receivers to the right, 2 wide receivers to the left, and the wide receivers to the right, let's say the guy in the slot's going to run a 15-yard dig route, right? So 15 yards straight, and then he stops and cuts right across the middle of the field. That's called a dig route. You're not going to run that route as a standalone route. You're going to run a route on top of that, right? So Trey Tucker will line up on the left side, a receiver on the slot on the right. The slot right receiver is going to run that dig route. Trey Tucker would run a post route behind that. And the post route is to occupy the safety, right? So Trey Tucker is essentially going to influence the defense, right? He takes 2 guys with him as he runs deep. And then Jakobi Meyers runs like that dig route. Or in this case, probably be Jack Besh. Could be Jakobi. Could be Brock Bowers as well, right? And again, all the different roles that the Raiders have is kind of getting impressive, right? Because Brock Bowers, he's a tight end, phenomenal tight end, but he's also a slot wide receiver. Right, he can also beat most linebackers. He'll beat most corners. He'll beat most safeties. Right, so the Raiders now have all these different weapons, all these different options, and then that doesn't include Ashton Genty, who you brought in as well. That doesn't include the fact that bringing in all these guys out is great, but how do you actually have success revamping the offense without revamping the offensive line? And the Raiders definitely did a phenomenal job yesterday, kind of answering those questions. Right. I watched a lot of Caleb Rogers. I watched more Charles Grant. I already knew Charles Grant was a really, huge upside prospect. And, I should say this, Charles Grant, I don't know why I was mixing up with Charles Grant is not a finished product today, right? He does have to develop. I think the best thing the Raiders can do is sit him for a year and let him develop to be the right tackle of the future, right? That way, if DJ Glaze is not the guy at right tackle, Grant's your guy, right? But he has to develop. Now, you can also, if DJ Glaze is the guy, throw in Grant at the right guard position. And with that, I would honestly, with Caleb Rogers, move him to left guard right away. And I think John Spytek said something about one being a guard, one being a tackle in yesterday's presser. I haven't watched it, but someone did say that. So I'm going to still go back and watch that today. But anyways, just getting back to Thornton and kind of what the Raiders have been building on the offensive side, it's impressive as hell. Right? I think Thornton has a ton of upside and potential. Will he be able to come to the Raiders and actually have success? Will he be able to take that structure, right? That 6'5" body, the 4'3" speed, right? Will he be able to take those God-given talents and actually put it together as a wide receiver? That's still to be kind of seen. Obviously, Tennessee runs I don't want to say it's a gimmicky offense, because it's worked, right? But the thing with Tennessee's offense is it's meant for high stats. It's not meant to win championships, in my opinion, right? And I say that because Tennessee will come out with 5 offensive linemen, 1 running back, and a bunch of receivers, and they just push the ball deep, right? Push the ball deep, and then what they'll do is they push the ball deep so often, teams will start playing light boxes against Tennessee. And then with that, as teams are playing light boxes, they have these super explosive running backs, right? Just guys that are fast. And it's a light box already, so you already have the numbers on the offensive side. And these running backs will just hit it for 80 yards on any given play. And then you stack the box. Well, now what happens is Thornton gets behind the defense, and he hits you for a touchdown any given play, right? So statistically, Tennessee's offense is great, but what happens is when they play a good scheme, when they play a good defense, they're not going to be able to win, right? That offense is not going to work, in my opinion. But do also understand with the 661 yards that Thornton had this past season, that was on 26 catches with the freshman quarterback. Right now, I know the quarterback transferred to UCLA, but given the fact that this season, he had 3 catches for 118 yards against Vanderbilt, 3 catches for 104 yards against Mississippi State. That's impressive as hell, right? But he also did not have any catches against Georgia, right? 0 catches against Georgia. 1 catch against Ohio State, right? So, we're going to find out how this guy translate. And I should also just kind of say this as I end this video. It's not Thornton's fault that he ended up in the Tennessee offense. I believe he transferred to Tennessee, but it's not his fault, right, that he's in that offense that he's in, right? Maybe if he played with C.J. Stroud or Joe Burrow, right, if he had the opportunity to play with those guys, maybe he would have been a top 10 pick, right? We don't know, right? But that's one of the things I love about the NFL draft is you can get these type of players that have traits that most other guys don't have, and you can try to make it work. And I do have faith in Chip Kelly, right? I do think he's a good coach, and I do have faith in what John Spytek's been able to do up to this point. You're adding guys that are like freaky, that are just different, right? So we'll see what ends up happening. Let me know what you guys think about this pick. The Raiders, I think, have like 6 picks today, so it's going to be a really, really busy day for the Las Vegas Raiders. Let me know what you guys think, man. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time with another video.